Welcome to the Sex, God, and Chaos podcast, a conversation built to help you address the mess, connect the dots, and defeat addiction. Doing your work matters because if nothing changes, then nothing changes. Life is tough and we're here to help. I'm your host, Ben Derrick, and as always, I'll be joined by Roan Hunter. Let's jump right in. Well, Roan, sometimes apparently a podcast needs a break, just a breather, and we took one.
Well, it seems that we had a slight vacation. I think it's just because we've both been very busy. It seems that that's just the nature of the beast these days. I don't think it's just us helper types. It seems to be everyone I know is busy, and we have been. But hey, we're back. We're back.
We are. Yeah. And here's the great thing is that you've had a lot of time to pick out a topic that you and I riff on just in our friendship, actually on a very regular basis. And you've put some stuff together that I think is going to be very helpful for our listening audience because it's a phrase that we use often. I use often in my practice, and I find that people give me a blank stare whenever I say this phrase. But as I start to describe it, man, there is just so much freedom involved here.
Well, it seems, Ben, that people give you a lot of blank stares. It may not just be this
because
phrase.
Of the topic. Yeah, that's right. I knew where you were headed with that, right?
No doubt.
Even in the Deep South, though, it's you just assume that people would understand certain religious dynamics, and maybe that's a bad assumption. But overall, we kind of tiptoe around this topic quite a lot because we want to be respectful of those people of faith, of Christians, and we are Christians. So, but we also don't want to force that on people in a recovery journey. We do believe that it's very central to actually living a healthy life. The problem is it's been bastardized by so many efforts and so many Christian efforts. So this topic, I think, is going to be really crucial for those people who believe primarily that God is against them because they're so bad. And man, do we fight that. I mean, in fact, Christian counselors are making a mint these days off trying to untangle those wires. And this episode, these next two episodes actually are going to provide what I would call a warm start for someone to begin to understand the idea that they have heard language and been taught things that are simply not helpful. Would you agree?
Oh, yeah, 100%. And certainly in my own journey, and some of the things that I heard, especially early on, and I was still, I guess, kind of a baby Christian. And, you hear things from people that you certainly respect and kind of think that they know what they're talking about. But boy, there are a lot of things that I heard that were not helpful. And so, whenever I first heard this term, and we could put a lot of different words around it, but this idea of spiritual bypass, and it's basically just kind of trying to find a shortcut to the recovery process, to the growth process, to the sanctification process, to the maturing process, whatever it is that however we want to frame it, it's really all the same because what we are looking for is just the softer, easier way, as we talk about in recovery world. And I've been at this now 35 years, and one thing that I have learned is that there is no softer, easier way. And so often, well-meaning people in faith communities, because I don't think this is just in the Christian community. In fact, the guy that in kind of reading about the origins of this, or just this idea of spiritual bypass, the guy that came up with it, he's a therapist. But I think he was in the Buddhist faith community. Half our audience they just went click because I even said the word Buddhist. Yeah, but I'm like, I'm not saying it's a good thing. Everybody hang in there, because it's just the idea that no matter what faith you are, what religion you're a part of, this stuff permeates all of it, and it's just important to really begin to understand what exactly are we talking about when we talk about spiritual bypass, because a huge component of our recovery journey is the spiritual aspect. And of course, we don't make any bones about it. We believe that Jesus Christ is our higher power, and we believe that He certainly came and walked this earth as fully as a man, and He modeled what it means to be whole. What it means to be holy, which I think those two words, I think you could spell that WHOLY, because those things are not separable. You can't separate wholeness from holiness. We try to in various ways, but wholeness is just the idea. I've had people ask me, "What does it mean to be a whole person?" And I would always say, well, I think that's somebody that can, they know how to emotionally regulate, and they are relationally functional, not dysfunctional. That's a pretty simple definition of a whole person.
Yeah, I would totally agree. And part of why we're attacking this issue in particular is because it's so sinister in convincing people that they have achieved wholeness by blaming things on God, essentially, either good or bad, and trying to pass the buck of responsibility, which fights against what we know is absolutely critical for sobriety, which is ownership and a rigorous commitment to reality at all costs, which I know we're going to get to later in this episode. So let's just take a moment and kind of define spiritual bypass, which I think the most helpful way to do that is to describe what it sounds like, to basically model for our listeners. If you hear phrases like this, then you're most likely running into spiritual bypass. I know the first one for me, I heard at a very young age. I was 16, 17 years old, and I had someone in a choir robe, which is how this usually goes, see me after a service, and they pulled me aside in the hallway and said, Ben, God's going to use this. God's just going to use this. And I was very emotionally dysregulated because of something that was going on in my life that was very public inside of the church. And an adult pulled me aside and just tried to put the icing on the cake there to say, I know this is difficult, but eventually God's going to leverage this for his own causes. And I remember thinking in the hallway, well, he could have done this a lot different way. Like that was my initial response.
Sure.
However, the longer I was in the community of faith, the more I began to, pardon the phrase here, but drink that Kool-Aid of, well, yeah, I mean, it may be bad, but God's going to use it, and that's all that matters. And man, could you layer a lot of Bible over that? But phrases like God's going to use this, or when God closes a door, he opens a window, or my personal favorite that I like to quote in my practice is to correct, actually, is Romans 8:28, because people will just look at other people that are in just desperate levels of pain, either because of what's happened to them or through them, and they hear a Christian say, well, all things work together for the good. And it's kind of on the way to the car after the service. You're like, what the hell is that supposed to mean?
Yes.
Right? So those are kind of my top line examples. Yeah, right. Thank you. Yeah. So those are my top line examples. I'm sure you have many more and different ones as well.
Man, we could just go down. We could probably do a whole episode of just the examples, right, and the things that we've all heard. And when you're in just excruciating emotional pain, not just some physical ailment. I think the church kind of does a good job with physical illness. In some ways, because everybody will rally and they're going to line up the meal train, and everybody's going to bring meals by. But man, when you're in emotional pain based on something that you did, or even, you're married to somebody who did something. Boy, you talk about the avoidance like the plague. You're not going to get a meal train when you've betrayed your partner, and it's come out. You're going to be lucky to not get drugged behind the church and beat with a Bible or something. But boy, there's so many examples. I early on, I remember speaking at a pastor's conference, and I was part of a very large recovery and support group ministry, and fortunate to get connected with that early in my recovery. And the guy that started it, he wrote a book, The Complete Handbook for Recovery Ministry in Support Group and Recovery Ministry in the Church. And the leadership team, which we didn't even use that word, we were the trusted servants, because we know that leadership, when you get in the church world, man, that can mess some people up, because it'll go to their head, and I'm the leader, do what I say, and that's dangerous. But we were speaking at a pastor's conference talking about this, and it was a large conference, and a guy gets up, because we had, microphones in the audience, and he asked the question of like, so how could you even say you were a Christian and you were doing the things that you were doing? Now, that's not necessarily spiritual bypass. That's actually a spiritual attack. Yeah, and I wanted to ask this guy, like, have you read the Old Testament? I'm thinking he had. What do you think?
Yeah, probably not. Yeah.
But it's the things that, and if you've been in recovery and you're around church, you hear things like, well, if you pray harder, that's one of my all-time favorites, because I'm like, what does that mean? Do I grunt when I pray? That's gonna make the difference,
right?
And things like, if you just love Jesus more, sometimes those things are pretty overt, but sometimes it's much more subtle. And ultimately what it boils down to, it is judgment. And we talk about the three things that kill intimacy, that kill relationship: secrets, silence, and judgment. And boy, that judgment thing is a poison, I think, in a lot of faith communities. And I'll just talk about the one that I've been a part of forever, and will be, even though I get frustrated with it, and I always say, I throw rocks through the stained glass windows from the inside, because you got to be a part in order to change it. But some of this stuff is just so harmful. As you said earlier, you've gotten your, I guess it was when you got your cancer diagnosis, and you have somebody give you this wonderful platitude. And, I think the model in the Bible is, when Job is actually, he is in a living hell because he's lost everything. All of his children are dead, and he's got, sores, and then the three buddies come to sit with him. And when they first got there, he was in such pain, they didn't even recognize him. And then they just sat with him, and they didn't say a word. And then they started talking, and things went very south. And so much of it is just learning how to be with people when they are in pain, and not avoid it, not try to, help them by giving them some silver lining. But it's just empathy is just feeling with, and I don't have to say anything. Sometimes words are totally inadequate.
Yeah, and I think that's what we want to do is we want to fill the space. So I want to get kind of to what we're going to talk about as far as motivation and stance that's required for someone to participate or administer spiritual bypass. But just so we lock this part of the conversation in, one of my personal favorites that moved in kind of in the late 90s is God is good, and then people look back and say all the time, and then the person says all the time, and the person says God is good. And it's just a way for us to kind of rise above the total depravity and muck of what's going on here on planet Earth and the brokenness that we are existing within that does a lot of damage to us and a lot of damage around us. And I think it would be important too to talk to some of our more educated listeners, our Presbyterian brethren, who even sitting at men's weekends that you and I have been a part of, just want to throw out this big idea of God. Well, God's providence. I mean, God is aware of things that we are unaware of, and if someone's holding my head underwater, it's because God's deemed it so. And it's just so easy for us to back up into these things, and really what it is a backing up. It's an avoidance of a lot of things that I'd like us to kind of start talking about now. The central posture or stance of engaging in spiritual bypass has a lot to do with avoidance, which is very similar to addiction, right? These things overlap so clearly.
Yeah, it really is. And so often when we hear these things, it certainly creates doubt because if we're engaged in church and we hear again someone in authority say something, and we just we will take it at face value. But that's why it's so important too for all of us to begin to do our own reading, begin to search this stuff out, begin to question things. That's part of the growth process. Is the Hebrews believe, Jewish people, they believe that the text is written to draw us deeper into the story, and so and then it's interesting. You did that God is good thing. And I remember Promise Keepers and, guys sitting in a stadium and chanting, we love Jesus. Yes, we do. We love Jesus. How about you? And it's like,
that is perfect.
Yes. I mean, and I remember taking a guy with me who did not know Jesus, and he, I don't think he'd hardly ever been to church, maybe Catholic, but I mean, he's looking at this stuff and he's like, this, you people are insane. And there's probably some truth to that. But at the same time, just one of the simple things in church world that, all the worship songs that we sing today, everything is just, happy, 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 feel good, feel good, feel good. And there's no space for lament. There's a book in the Bible called Lamentations, and it's the lament of the prophet Jeremiah over the complete and utter destruction of Jerusalem. And it was bad. But again, that's kind of a cultural spiritual bypass that we're seeing. I saw a quote the other day. There's a book called Prophetic Lament, and he kind of dives into the evangelical church in the U.S. and he calls it the masterful avoidance of lament. Which is the language of suffering, and here's what it says: while 40% of the Psalms in the Bible are Psalms of lament, our churches only sing songs of lament between 13 and 19% of the time. From this avoidance of suffering, we overemphasize praise and celebration. Man, that's a problem because if you're sitting there and I don't know, we could use a lot of examples, but let's just say you just lost a child in some tragic way, and then everybody is there singing, happy, 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 wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. You might be in a different place. And I'm not saying we can cater individually to everybody, but boy, this idea of like just sadness and grief, and again, every human being is experiencing that. I mean, if you're not, we've either been through it, we're either going through it, or we're getting ready to go through it, tomorrow. And so we have to begin to allow for the processing of pain instead of the avoidance of it. And then the other piece with the spiritual bypass is, and okay, I'm trying not to pick on pastors, but I'm just going to pick on you because you're a former pastor. But
that's right.
And so this. So many people go into ministry, and what they're really, they want to be a helper, and I think the motivation in some ways is good. But the thing that is missing, and this is true of counselors, anybody that goes into a helping profession, is you really, so many never deal with the unresolved issues from their own childhood, their own trauma, their own tragedies, the things that have happened to them. And again, it kind of makes sense if you grow up in church world, you have no idea that there is such a thing as lament and grieving and suffering because everything is happy, happy, happy. And I love Jesus, and I'm just going to go tell everybody about Jesus. But if we don't do our own work, what we're going to do is inflict our love on those poor people that we're trying to help.
Yeah, it's like a self-licking ice cream cone, really. I can tell you as a pastor, we struggled. I struggled in the community, and I'll say this very publicly all the time. Beautiful community. I mean, about as close to getting it right as you could possibly be at that time. And we couldn't get people to a Good Friday service. Like nobody's coming to that. But come Easter Sunday, man, everybody's filling the room, and it's a pep rally for Jesus. And the thing that gets me so frustrated about it today is how isolating it is and how well-intentioned people are that are doing it. I used the phrase with my wife on a walk a couple of days ago. I said, early in my faith, I was just so drunk on religion that I wasn't a disciple. I thought I was a disciple, but it was the religion that had me punch drunk. And we start to just propagate these systems over and over again because it's what we've learned. And there's just no room for the teaching of Jesus that says, in this world, you will have trouble. Pain is a part of life, and the Bible is very honest about it from the extreme beginning. I mean, if you want to see a story that goes completely off the rails, just crack open the Bible. I mean, in the first book, it's like, this is the most sinister, mixed up crap I think I've ever read in my life. But it is real life, and I think what we're trying to attack right now, at least in this segment of the episode, is spiritual bypass is just some sort of holy masquerading version of avoidance. And it really frustrates people in their life that are trying to commit to a healthy, sober, committed to honesty lifestyle when they wander into communities of faith and they realize this is just a different version of what I was doing before, and there's not a lot of help here because people are unwilling to engage with their emotions, with my emotions, and specifically the uncomfortable emotions. This is a very dangerous construct, and it causes a lot of people who've experienced addiction or brokenness separate themselves from that community and then be judged for it. So this is why we're talking about it, trying to attack not only the people's experience, but also the pastors that may be listening. And this is why it was so awesome to have a pastor on a couple of episodes ago that was talking about difficulty. Like, how amazing was that? So it really comes down to our inability in faith communities to handle, to deal with, to talk through difficult emotions. We call that in our line of work emotional suppression. So let's talk a little bit about difficult emotions and how you guide people through that, or what that looks like to engage with them.
Well, this idea of just emotional sobriety, I do believe that it's kind of the ultimate goal in recovery. Whatever we're recovering from doesn't really matter. I always say that the acting out behavior, in some ways, is irrelevant. Boy, we'll get emails about that statement. But
I completely agree with you on that, though, not to interrupt, but yes, I say that all the time. You are so fixated on your acting out behavior that it's actually become your identity, and you don't know how you're going to live without it or who you are without it, but that should not be the focus in your recovery. Your version of acting out, my version of acting out, it's all got the same base.
Oh, totally. When you get outside of just, the chemicals, drugs and alcohol, the acting out with that is, it's pretty simple. I'm going to ingest this substance to alter my mood. I think unless you're just a complete moron or something, you know that if you take this drug, something's going to happen. Same thing with alcohol, right? But when it gets into some of these other things that we probably, if we could be king for a day, we would call them distress reduction behaviors, because it's just around sex. I always say it's kind of like Baskin Robbins 31 wonderful flavors, because there's a lot of nuances. There's a lot of things in the acting out behaviors around sexually acting out. It looks different, and sometimes it is unique to each individual. I won't even say sometimes, it always is, because one person's arousal template is different from the others. Your trauma, the things that happen to you, sometimes can be a part of, will be a part of the forming of your arousal template. And then beginning to kind of, that becomes your go-to way that you choose to act out sexually. But it's different for someone else. And so we really have to kind of, I don't like this, in some ways it's kind of this cookie cutter approach to everybody that's dealing with sexual brokenness. And we got to treat this in the model that we've been taught to, been trained in. And certainly, some of the fundamentals are there. But when you boil it down, what you're going to wind up with is you're working with trauma and story. That's the bottom line. In any mental illness, personality disorder, anxiety, depression, whatever it is, when you start scratching the surface, what you're going to get to is trauma. And so we have to begin to understand our story in the context of the things that happened to us, and then also the things that happened through us. It's one of the things that is often, I think, for those of us that are dealing with sexual brokenness, there's a huge focus now on betrayed partners, and rightfully so. However, one thing that I do believe is kind of forgotten or dismissed is that those of us that were exposed to this crap, when I'm talking about pornography or some form of sexual abuse, way too early in our lives, man, we were victims. We were victimized. And that doesn't mean now I'm just going to go walk around being a victim, which is true on the betrayed partner side too. I mean, trauma is going to happen to every one of us. If you're a human being and you're walking around in your earth suit, you're going to have experienced trauma. And the thing with trauma is it's going to happen. And I can either take that, and my choice in it is it's either going to be a tragedy or a triumph. And that's on me. I've got to do my work no matter how I've experienced trauma, no matter how that came in my life. And again, man, I was exposed to pornography at 8 years old. And holy cow, if I knew what I knew now at 63 when I was 8 years old, and I would have seen that crap, I would have just, I'd have run out of the room. I would not have indulged in it. But what does an 8-year-old know other than, oh wow, that's really, really something? And then we think we discovered fire. But one of the things I do think is that we forget that there is a victim side to those of us that we term addicts. And that's true with, doesn't really matter whether it's, sexual brokenness or alcohol abuse, drug abuse, all of those things. Man, in some way, when you start looking at it, that person was victimized or early on in their life through some form of trauma.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, just bending this back towards our spiritual Christian communities, we celebrate these emotional highs or spiritual highs or moments of transcendence. And the way I like to prove this is to ask people to think back to when they see a story on a screen in a church service. And do you ever hear a guy say, or a marriage say, this was the battle of our lives for 6 years after this thing happened. And there were more days that we wanted to give up on each other and God than good days. And we for damn sure didn't enjoy going to church because everybody was so put together. But listen, God was faithful. We co-labored with God. We were in therapy twice a week for 5 years. And we actually learned what love was about, what the grace of God was about. But honestly, there are days where we slingshot back to those original days after discovery or disclosure, and we're still working through that. And if you're a person in this service that feels that way, please don't go down to the front for prayer after service for 30 seconds. Hit us up and let's have a conversation over a dining room table and figure this out. No, the thing that we hear is, and then God took it from me. God just took the desire away, and I've never felt it again. And so we just really applaud these like divine interventions, like parting the Red Sea or water into wine. And rather than making those things the exception, which by the way, Jesus actually did in his ministry, those things were the exception. We make them the rule or the standard. So we start to pursue these spiritual highs. And look, watching my teenage sons engage with communities of faith, we're spending tens of thousands of dollars to create this template. Instead of an arousal template, we're creating this spiritual template in our sons and daughters and teaching them to chase these spiritual highs at some summer camp somewhere, and it's wrecking people. This is really frustrating me because it's becoming generational, and you and I sit with people in a stage of their life where they have no choice but to acknowledge the negative emotions and the negative things going on in their story. That they're out of options. In my current church, I love the place that I'm going to now. They say the phrase every Sunday that Jesus is for the people who have no excuses left. And what a sobering reminder. So part of getting around of bypassing spiritual bypass is the acknowledgement of negative emotions and refusing to use some sort of divine high to get past the real earthy pain that we are required to pace through. But when people commit to do that, when they commit to doing their work, it feels very odd inside these faith communities. Like, I feel like it's more at home in your practice there in Madison than it is in the churches that surround that practice on the same road.
Man, Ben, that whole idea of, like, again, putting people up on the screen or bringing them up on the stage, and they've got some, great story. Obviously, something good has happened, but they're only 6 months out of D-Day, or all hell breaking loose, and now everything's kind of hunky dory. I mean, and again, I get it. You want to offer people hope. But at the same time, it may not be the best way to offer them hope, because this stuff, whatever it is that happens, it took years to form in us. And it's probably not going to be 6 months when everything gets, roses and rainbows. It's going to take the work to unentangle, to unlearn and relearn, as Jesus told Nicodemus. That's what born again means, right? You got to unlearn all this stuff that you thought was going to get you to God, and then you've got to relearn, my way, my truth, my life. And that's the hard part in this, because I'm unlearning and relearning on a constant basis. And even one of the things you said so often, it's like, just a basic concept of what real love is. Because, one of the things that happens if a husband's had an affair and the wife is, she's like, did you tell her that you loved her? And boy, I do this. I'll just say, hey, hang on. I'll raise my hand and interject at that point and say, look, who knows? Maybe he did, but and we don't know. We may, we might not ever know. But here's one thing we do know. What we do know is he has no idea what real love is, because if he knew what that was, number one, you wouldn't be sitting here on my couch. And number two, if he said it, it was meaningless. So maybe we could just, put that to rest for now, because it. And again, I'm sitting with people that are typically they're around church, they're involved in church, they know of church, and we're in the deep South, and everybody has a Bible. It may be grandmama's that was passed on to you in the will, but there's a Bible somewhere. But the lack of even basic understanding of what real love is, the way Jesus talked about it, is, boy, again, I believe that's kind of a cultural form of spiritual bypass. Because, man, Jesus' love, it ain't mamby-pamby. It ain't nice and sweet. Love is hard. Love is tough. Love confronts. Love tells the truth. There's a whole lot to Jesus' love, and that can often be very different than church love.
No doubt about it. And I've been waiting to get to this point in the episode. I've surprised myself that I've actually been able to wait this long. But for me, the most sinister and dangerous part about this approach of spiritual bypass is the arrogance that it leads to, the spiritual narcissism, if you will. When we are absent of empathy because we can't engage with our own brokenness, then we have to masquerade, we have to put on the mask, and we have to convince other people that we've got it all together. And this is why these phrases are so important to be able to sling around, especially if you're a pastor, to be able to sling them around from the pulpit, because it's, quite frankly, it's job security, to be able to present as having it all together and work through that. And listen, this other thing I just really want to drive home, so that people can share this episode with their pastor. If you're going to talk about your brokenness, don't make it 30 years ago. That's even more infuriating. Don't do that.
Oh, yeah.
Talk to me about how you got sideways
Today.
with your wife and you had trouble managing your own anxiety and actually preparing for this Sunday, and your imposter syndrome, no matter how expensive your jeans and boots are as you saunter out onto stage. Give me something real. Give me something right now, because if not, then I already feel judged from the moment that I step foot on the sidewalk in the front of the church that you probably have gotten indebted to. The bank really owns your church. Jesus Christ doesn't own your church. The bank does. And let's be honest about that. And you're trying to say things that help people feel better to give more money to this cause. I mean, I'm going to attack it even harder than you, particularly in this episode, because I've just got some recent frustrations. But the things that I'm saying are true. They're not false. And the reason I'm so aggressive towards the spiritual bypass is because I sit with men, and I want to say this very plainly. Mm-hmm. I sit with men every single week that are continuing in their shame and self-criticism because they have gone to the church as medicine, and it has provided instead for them a bitter poison of spiritual bypass. And I'm ready for us to change that. As believers, we have the greatest message of grace and hope that the world has ever heard. And it includes our brokenness. Without our brokenness, why would grace or the sacrifice of Jesus Christ be required? So I'm reducing the potency of the crucifixion if I pretend when I go into a church that because of my Cole Haans and my golf polo and my flat front khakis and my beautiful family that I've got everything together. This is just simply not required for the kingdom to expand. And I think one thing that we have to be very aggressive towards, and look, I'll say this behind Mike as well. I love you so much as a friend and as a man because you are not afraid to get aggressive towards the things that are compromising the efforts of the gospel, especially in the Deep South in America. This arrogance is something, and I'm going to pause here in just a minute, but this arrogance is something that bothers you and me equally, doesn't it?
Oh, dude, it is. I've just, I've been beating my head against that wall for so long, and just in my recovery journey, because I have been talking to pastors, church staff people, I mean, you name it, and then I in some ways I can't stand the term, but there was a lot of gaslighting, a lot of spiritual superiority. And spiritual narcissism. Somehow, if I just learned how to walk in the Spirit and not in my flesh, again, there's a great spiritual bypass term. I mean, we could just go on and on. But boy, you nailed it, Ben. It's just this idea of like, hey, you know what? I'm human, and I struggle. But boy, we have a Savior. That's what we call him. He came and he offered us a way to God that we do not have to wallow in our shame because of what he did on that cross. And he died for my sin, my past sin, my present sin, and my future sin. And now because of grace, the beautiful picture of the grace of his blood, I can approach the throne of God with my head held high, and knowing that because of Jesus, I am a friend of God. He's not my enemy, and he's not out to get me. And boy, we can develop shame resilience.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I mean, Jesus himself, it isn't the healthy that need a doctor. It's the sick that need a doctor.
Yes. Oh, yeah. I mean, it's
how
just,
plain is this?
Yeah, we could go, just verse after verse after verse. And then I don't know, when we just talk about, the text and passages that I think illustrate spiritual bypass, it's, Jesus meeting the woman at the well. I mean, this is just one for me. And Jesus is talking to her. She doesn't know who he is from nothing. He's just a dude getting water. She knows he's Jewish, I guess, by looking at him. And she was a Samaritan woman, I think, right? And anyway, she's just, they're having a conversation, getting water for the camel or the donkey or whatever. And then she gets into kind of this theological debate with Jesus. And then Jesus asks her about her 5 husbands. Oh my gosh. And then, boy, you see her trying to change that subject in that conversation, right? That's painful. She wants to avoid that. Oh my goodness. Wouldn't we all? I say with people, that's what this is all about. It's just a fear-driven avoidance of our own pain and discomfort. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to admit it. I want to be okay. And but boy, Jesus just debunks all of that, time and time and time and time again. And even with the Pharisees, it's just so comical because they want to have these great theological debates about whatever, and Jesus just always goes straight to the heart, man. It's all about the heart. It's all about the heart. It's all about the heart. And he's just talking about our attitude, our judgment, all those things that we're all prone to do.
Yeah, and without our heart, I would say, I want to be careful to make things too binary or left and right, but when I sit with people and when I examine my own life, even in recent history with transitioning out of the pastorate and pursuing things that God has asked me to do, just my levels of anxiety have been, the highest they've ever been in my life as a 45-year-old male. And I just look back on my story in different seasons over the past 3 years, and I can see I've been guilty of one of two things. I either overcorrect by taking control and slapping some Bible on it. And I'm talking about when I look back and read my own journals, I'm like, whoa, man, you're not being honest with yourself here. That's not how you really felt, but you were typing it out because maybe your sons are going to read it one day. So I either overcorrect with a lot of spiritual bypass, or I undercorrect by going victim and making everything everyone else's fault instead of just facing reality and facing the truth. And I love that you bring up the invitational nature of God for those of us that are caught in this. The woman at the well, the man on the mat, he asked the question, and Jesus, the actual version of Jesus that is real, is so invitational, and he asked these questions to invite us in to reflect on the truth, to reflect on the pain, in order to actually, and you mentioned it earlier, to actually process it so that it doesn't demand our attention or control us moving forward. If I eject or spiritual bypass, then I'm just handing the keys of my life to that particular thing for the rest of my life. And the truth is, spiritual growth is often very slow. It's often very messy, very gritty, and it's not going to make sense on a screen or in a sermon. It's going to make more sense around a campfire or over a beer most times than it does in those environments. And I want us to be able to offer some freedom to the men and women listening to say, hey, if you're in a slow process that feels like it's moving up and to the right, but it's very unpredictable, that's probably more accurate than the things that you're seeing out of the Christian community from a distance.
Oh, totally. And, with some of this, just as I mentioned earlier, there's this idea of victim blaming, just like when the guy asked me in the pastor's conference if you were really a Christian. Again, I don't think anybody, if we walked into a room full of third graders and said, okay, everybody raise your hand, who wants to grow up and be an alcoholic? Raise your hand. Who wants to grow up and be a porn addict? Raise your hand. I don't think anybody would raise their hand, right? And so even that tells us, man, I was a victim of being exposed to this crap. And so there's this element of victim blaming. I've had so many wives partners, and even I sit with and work with, that the couple has gone to the pastor. It seems to be the for some reason a guy that has had no training in marriage counseling at all when he went to seminary, but somehow we're going to go talk to that guy whose marriage is probably struggling mightily as well, but because of all the stuff we've talked about, he can't even possibly say that. I mean, I get it. He's going to get fired if he's not the representation of just this spiritual perfection. I mean, it's just so sad on so many levels. But they've gone and met with the guy, which guy is the key word here. And he looks at the wife and he says something like, well, if you just had more sex with him, then he probably wouldn't be doing this stuff. Oh my gosh. Now that's a horrible example, maybe the most horrible example of spiritual bypass you could ever come across, because he is victim blaming a betrayed partner. Because we know that this stuff, his acting out, the things that he's done, it has nothing to do with your wife on any level. That stuff was programmed, coded in way before he ever met you. And then to go and trying in some way to get help, and then you get this stuff like that, man, that is, now we're moving into harm. And I wish it could be criminal and we could, lock some of these people up or send them off to, I don't know, put them out in the desert with no water for a little while, maybe a long time, whatever, some form of punishment.
You feel very passionately about this. So this has been a great conversation so far. Yeah, exactly. And I think we have so many words because we live this every day on the other side. So actually, I want to break this up into a part 1 and a part 2. Next time we come back, I'd really like to talk about the solution set, what it looks like, because the opposite of bypass is transformation. And you guys have a phrase that you use, and forgive me, I can't pull it up right now, but it's something about the transmission of pain. Do you know the phrase that I'm talking about? If you don't transform it, something or another?
Yes, that's it. I mean, this pain that we all have, if we do not transform our pain, and what that is just simply the idea of growth, processing, dealing with your trauma, understanding this stuff, becoming aware of it. If we don't transform our pain, it is a guarantee that you will transmit your pain. And the Bible backs that up. The sins of the fathers, which that word really, it's closer to the idea of the dysfunction. The dysfunction of the fathers will be passed, and the mothers. We got to throw them in there. They're not perfect. Ladies, you're not perfect. But the sins of the fathers will be passed on to the next generation, the second, third, fourth, fifth, forever generations, until somebody decides that they're going to stand up, make a stand, take a stand, and begin to transform their pain, certainly for good, for generations to come.
That feels like a beautiful place to pause this conversation. So if you've been hanging with us through this episode and trying to determine, have I done this? Has this been done to me? One thing we want to mention to you is that accountability in our world is not judgment. It's actually very caring to bring the truth to something. And we are for you if you found yourself in this position, either committing spiritual bypass or being the victim of spiritual bypass. Hang in there. Visit us next episode. We're going to come back. We're going to talk about genuine spiritual growth, what it actually looks like, and how to commit to the slow process of becoming whole.
Amen.
To learn more about what you've heard today and to engage with the Sex, God, and Chaos team, visit sexgodchaos.com.